Welcome and greetings, students. Happy first day of nutrition and our summer session together. So what we're going to do is I am going to try to provide for you some audio, visual, to go along with the PowerPoints for each chapter that we're going to cover. So what that means is that I'm going to try and keep them very brief. And I'm going to go through the slides quickly to try to point out the information that I think is pertinent for you to have for exams, for quizzes, for upcoming assignments. And the rest, I'm going to ask that you go ahead and learn on your own. So again, my goal is not to go through every single slide and talk everything about it, or else we'll have these videos being an hour and a half long. But rather, I'm going to point out some of the crucial information, but make sure that on your time, all of that 8.5 hours a week that you're supposed to be spending online for this class, that you're going through the slides and you are correlating with the textbook and making sure that you understand the information, or pose any questions to me so I can clarify that for you. So let's jump in. So let's talk about food. Let's talk about nutrition and talk about, what does this all mean for us and what are we going to learn this coming semester? So as you can see here, what we're looking at is the different ways or the different kind of categories that influence what we eat. A lot of it comes from our culture, right? How many of you grew up in homes where there were particular foods that you ate in your culture? And so you may not have been exposed to other ethnic foods or other foods from other cultures, right? Some of what we eat comes from peer pressure or the social aspect of going to eat someplace together with a group of people and feeling like you need to eat that food because you're in that situation. And then, of course, food provides us with a lot of different psychological aspects. In other words, we often eat food for comfort. Right? When you go through a breakup or something happens and that gallon of mint chocolate chip ice cream is just calling your name, that's what we're talking about when we say that sometimes we make food choices based on a need that we have psychologically, a need for some comfort. And so these are some of the reasons that we go through our food choices. All right, so what determines, again, whether or not a food is possibly available to us or we choose a food? As you can see here, there's a variety of different reasons, whether they be to do with your culture, your religious background, a habit that you always eat pizza on Friday night, if that's the habit, right? But some of the three that we're going to point out to be at the top of the list here would be our health status. So if you are diabetic, you're limited in your food choices, right? My mom is diabetic type 2, and she's limited. She doesn't get to eat all the cakes and the sugars that she wants to eat because of that concern. Where you live also plays a role in whether or not you make a food choice. So again, is the food available, right? Do you live in possibly an urban community, meaning downtown, very crowded area, where you might not have a lot of access to fresh fruits and vegetables, right? Do you have to take public transportation to get to the store? Is it convenient for you to access that food, right? So these are some of the things that have to do with where we live and how we can get to food. And then, of course, whether or not we can afford it. Our socioeconomic status really means our class or our income level. And whether or not you are in that lower income level or the upper income level determines whether or not you can afford to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, or whether or not you can afford to buy organic foods. And so that plays into our food choices. Right here, let's look real quick at how food and cooking in general has really changed over time. So today, we spend a whole lot less time in the kitchen than we used to. If you look at the slide here, we're comparing males and females, so males being the darker purple color, females being that kind of lightish green color. And we look at from 1965 to 2007, we see here that basically the time that women are spending in the kitchen, right, was right about 110 maybe minutes per day. That's been reduced. So we're down to a little over an hour that women are spending in the kitchen, right? But look at men. So back in 1965, we had under 40% of men who were spending, we had about this percentage of men that were spending less than 40 minutes in the kitchen. And now here we are in 2007, and we've got our men spending, 45, 50 minutes in the kitchen. And so that has changed too. And there's some reasons. We have 2 people working in the home. And so we get home from work, we have kids, we have responsibilities, and we're tired. And so we have turned to, unfortunately, a lot of what we call convenience foods or processed foods. And so our pantry and our freezer is stocked with that Stouffer's frozen lasagna, right? Marie Callender's little individual frozen meals. All of these foods are very convenient to us. However, you can imagine, don't have a lot of nutrients in them. So what has happened to that food is what we call food processing. Food processing is any time that we take a food from its natural state and we basically change it in some way. And most of the way that we change food here in America is by adding preservatives, right? So we add additives to food, we add preservatives to food. This means that I make it red by adding some food coloring to it. It means that I'm putting preservatives so that this loaf of bread is not going to mold in 3 or 4 days. But you know what? It can sit on your countertop for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, possibly 4 weeks without molding. The only way you can do that is because we've added something to it. Not always a good thing, but that is what food processing is. And we live in a very, very convenient society of having most of our foods processed now. Right, so again, look through this, but basically this semester, or this summer session, I should say, we're going to be talking about nutrition. We're going to talk about how our body takes this food and converts it into energy, right? We're going to talk about how we can look at the foods we eat and look at whether or not we develop some chronic diseases and some health consequences that come with the food choices we make. What are essential nutrients? So essential nutrients means that we need to get this food in our diet because our body can't make it or our body doesn't make enough of it. And so therefore, if our body can't produce it, we need to find it in what we eat and put it into our body, right? That's an essential nutrient. And that's what we'll talk more about, is how we need these essential nutrients and sometimes we're not getting them. We'll talk more about fortified foods and enriched foods as we go on in this session here. So looking here, we see the different nutrients that we need, right? We're talking about carbohydrates, protein, lipids. All of these different things provide energy, right? And then we'll talk about vitamins and minerals and water and how these things don't necessarily provide energy, but we still need them. They're still essential to our body. Right, classes of nutrients, we have what we call micronutrients and macronutrients. So think of it this way. Think of, when you think of macro, think of large or big. That means that our body needs large quantities of this nutrient. Micro would be the opposite, right? So micro means small. So it means that our body just needs a smaller amount of that nutrient. It's not as maybe important or crucial in the volume that we need to get of our macronutrients. And when we talk about macronutrients, for the exam, as you see here in red, you're going to want to make sure to remember that there's the big 3, right? We need our carbs, carbohydrates. We need our lipids, which is our fats, right? And we need protein. Those are the 3 big macronutrients that we need to be consuming in our diet, and we need these in large quantities. When we talk about the amount of energy in food, right, because our body is going to take food and convert it into energy, when we talk about it, we measure it in what we call kcalories or kilocalories, right? Sometimes we say kcals. Right? These are all abbreviations for the kilocalorie. And that's how we're going to talk throughout this learning time about how we're going to measure our foods and how much of our foods we're getting. All right, the 6 classes of nutrients here, you see here, we're going to talk about these all session long. So our 3 big ones that we talked about is going to be the carbohydrates, the lipids, and our protein. All 3 of these give our body energy. We need them, right? And these are macronutrients. The other macronutrient, which doesn't provide energy but is still crucial, and we must have it in large amounts, is water. we need to be drinking a lot of water every day. And we'll talk about how important water is later on. And then we see our vitamins and our minerals are really our micronutrients. We need them, but in smaller quantities. So what do these nutrients do for our body? We're going to talk about how all six of them, all six of what we just talked about, they do this thing where they regulate our body processes. And I'll explain more about what that means, right? But they basically help this machine, think of your body as this machine, they help it work, right? They help it go, they help it process the food, meet our needs, and we'll talk about how they do that. But all six of them are crucial in accomplishing regulating body processes, right? We can look a little bit later about inorganic and organic nutrients, but this is important. You're going to need to know this for the whole time that we're together learning about nutrients, right? So like as I said, think of your body as a car or as a machine. Those three macronutrients, the carbohydrates, the lipids, and the protein, they provide the gasoline. They provide that fuel that we're going to burn in our energy expenditure, right? And so we'll talk more about that. And we talked before, we're going to call that energy expenditure the K-calorie, the kilocalorie. However, the numbers for each of those three macronutrients might be a little bit different. So for instance, for our carbohydrates, whenever we eat carbohydrates, for every 1 gram of carbohydrate that we eat, we get 4 kilocalories. So it's a 1 to 4. 1 gram equals 4 kilocalories, right? When we eat our fats or our lipids, for every 1 gram of fat that we eat, we actually get 9 kilocalories, right? 9 per 1 gram. And then talking about our protein, when we eat our protein, for every 1 gram of protein, we get 4 kilocalories. So this is something you're going to need to memorize and know, because you, as somebody who's studying nutrition, need to be able to understand how much you're eating. Right? So if you got a certain number of grams of carbohydrates, you would multiply those grams times 4 to come up with the total number of carbohydrates that you ate. And so we're going to see that here. So for both your exam, number 1, and for, I think, an upcoming quiz that I have going on, you're going to need to do a problem like this. So calculate the total calories in a meal, right? So if you sat down for a meal and that meal had 60 grams of carbs, carbohydrates. The meal had 20 grams of protein, and your meal had 18 grams of fat, right? You're going to need to calculate that. So how would we do that, right? So go ahead and grab a pen and a paper. Let's go through it together, right? So what we would do is we would take our 60 grams of carbohydrate, and what did we say that 1 gram of carbohydrate was equal to in K-calories? We said it's equal to 4 K-calories. So what we would do is take our 60 grams of carbs and multiply that times 4, right? And we come up with what? 240? 240 kilograms that we're talking about here. Then we would take our grams of protein. So we have 20 grams of protein. Take our 20 grams, and we said, what did we say that a gram of protein equals in terms of kilocalories? We said it equals 4. So again, we take 20 grams of protein and we multiply that by 4, right? And so in doing that, we come up with 80 kilocalories, right? And then our last one is 18 grams of fat. Now remember we said in the previous slide that fat is a little bit different. For every gram of fat that we get, we're actually getting a lot more calories for that fat than we do for carbs or protein. So for our 18 grams of fat, we need to go ahead and multiply that times what? We said times 9, right? So times 9 K-calories, right? So what is that? Let's see here. Get out my nifty calculator. It is going to be 18 times 9. It's going to be 162. So that's 162 K-calories. So in order to calculate what was the total value or the total number of calories that I had in this meal, I need to add all 3 of those numbers together, right? So I'm going to take my 240, add it to 80, and add that to 162. And I come up with a total meal of about 482. Right? So basically, with those numbers, I consumed or ate 482 kilocalories for this one meal, which really might be more like looking at an adolescent meal proportion, right? Because as adults, we're looking at a 2,000 calorie kind of range that we're going for per day. So it's a little low, but that's okay. We wanted to know the total number of calories, and that's what we came up with. So again, for the final exam, for the quizzes, you're going to need to be able to do this process. So just start to remember carbs equals 4 kilograms, protein equals 4 kilograms, fat equals 9 kilograms. Okay? All right. All right, so let's talk about our different nutrients here. Carbs. Most of us, when we think of carbs, we think of pizza, we think of bread and pasta and cereal and chips and all these different kinds of things. But we also need to understand that our carbs turn into sugar for us, right? So carbohydrates are our primary fuel source. That's what our body needs. We need lots of carbs, 50% of our diet in carbs, right? So we need lots of carbs to fuel this body or this machine or mechanism. And our carbs are defined or broken up into simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. And we'll talk more about what that means later on. And we'll talk about how one might be better than the other, right? So simple and complex carbs. And carbs are our main source of where we want to get our kcals from, right? Lipids or our fats, right? So your fats, again, talking about, think of butter. Think of the fat in milk. Think of your oils that we cook with. A lot of our fruits, our creams, they have fats in them, right? And so our fats, or what lipids is what we call our fats, right? They're typically, they sustain us longer in the term of energy, because remember I said they give us that 9 kilocalories per gram of fat, right? And so they are kind of what we call this concentrated long form of energy, whereas carbohydrates burn off quickly. Fat lasts longer, right? Can be a good and a bad thing, right, for us. We'll talk about that. Fats are also broken up into saturated and unsaturated, and we'll talk about, again, how one is more favorable than the other when we talk about fats. And then we'll talk about proteins. Most of us, again, when we talk about protein, we think meat. We think of our chicken, we think of our beef, legumes or beans can be protein, right? So protein. And we need protein. Protein is required for growth, maintenance, and repair of the body. Kind of what we refer to as the building, the regulation, and immunity. They provide those 3 things for us that we need. We really, really do need them in our body. And so we need to get some protein in our diets. And vegans can get protein. You don't have to be someone who eats meat to get protein, but you have to work at it. You have to make sure that you're finding those protein sources from different nutrients to make sure that you're getting what you need here. Okay. All right, vitamins. So unlike the 3 we just talked about, vitamins are a micronutrient, meaning we don't need a whole lot of it. However, we do need them, right? And vitamins are classified as water or fat soluble, which means that the vitamin dissolves. Sometimes it dissolves in water and sometimes it dissolves in fat. And that makes them do different things in our body. Right, and minerals. Minerals are another one of those micronutrients, right? We need small amounts of it, right? Neither vitamins nor minerals give our body energy. However, we still need them, and we'll talk about what other things they do, as you can see here, right? Think about calcium and how much we need calcium to produce our skeletal structure, to produce strong bones, right? Minerals are broken up into major and trace minerals. And what we mean by that is major means I really need them, like in bigger amounts. They're more important, kind of like. And trace means I just need them in smaller amounts. Okay. All right, so again, let's talk about, we mentioned before that water is one of those macronutrients. Although water does not provide energy, it does lots of other things for us, right? If you look at your body right now, your body is made up of pretty much 60% water, right? Just a clue into how much we should be drinking to continue to replenish that water that we get rid of, right? Through our urination, through our sweat and our perspiration and all of those different processes that we do. So we need water greatly. All right, so our nutrients do lots of other things besides give us energy, right? They form structures, meaning that they form our skeletal system and our bones and our cell membrane structures, all of those things, and they regulate body processes, meaning that they help our lungs to go up and down. They help our blood to go through our body. They do so many things that keep us in this balance, or what we call homeostasis, right? So for this class, or for nutrition, think in general that in order to make this car or this machine work, right, I need food. Food is like the gasoline that I put in that will then turn into the energy that makes everything go, right? So I need energy for everything from breathing. In order to do that breath, my body required energy, to running a marathon. Your body requires more energy for that, right? But everything we do requires energy. So think about your diet. You want to eat your diet to provide your body with the required nutrients to be physically active and healthy, and to do all of the healthy things internally our body needs to do. However, understand that when we consume nutrients which provide energy in excess, in other words, when you get more or you eat more than is required for your body to process and for your physical activity level, what happens is we put on weight, right? So that's what happens, is basically when we get excess of what we need, the extra becomes the fat or adipose tissue. We'll talk about that becomes how we have an issue with being overweight, right? Again, I want you to look at this and understand how the human body works, right? And we'll talk about metabolism. What is metabolism? Metabolism is, here it says it's all the reactions that occur in your body, really. But metabolism is how we take food and convert it into energy. That process is huge, right? Some of us have a faster metabolism than others genetically. Genetically, you could just meet some people that eat a whole lot, consume a lot of calories, and they don't put on any weight, right? Other people like eat a small amount and they seem to put on that weight. Their metabolism is slower than those who have a faster metabolism. When we talk about our body keeping this metabolism in balance, we talk about homeostasis. So homeostasis is what we'll call this physiologic or physical process to keep body temperature, heart rate, blood sugar at a constant level, or what we call in balance. When your body is in balance, you're in homeostasis, right? When your body's out of balance, we call it allostasis, right? So let's say that you went to San Francisco for a night out and you did not bring a jacket, you were wearing shorts and a tank top, and you went to the city and you're freezing. You're freezing cold in San Francisco. What's going to happen is your body's going to start to shiver. Your body is going to start to shake without you trying to make it shake. It's just going to shake and shiver. Your teeth may start to chatter, right? What's happening is your body is saying to you, it's out of balance. It says, I'm not in balance. My body temperature is not in balance, and I am going to shiver to generate heat internally because I need to be in homeostasis at all times. And so that's how our body works. Our body will do things like that to cause it to be what we call in balance, in homeostasis. Right. Later in the session, we'll talk more about world hunger, starvation, and undernutrition. Okay? But what is nutrient density? So nutrient density, here it says it's a measure of the nutrient content, right, of a food compared to its energy content, or kcalories. So let's look at the example they give here. So here you see an example of comparing broccoli to French fries. So if we look at energy, we see that our French fries has a lot more, it's carbohydrate, right? So remember, carbohydrates are fast energy sources. And so our French fries have a lot of kcals, right? They're giving us that energy, right? So we see, 75 or so calories from our French fries, whereas our broccoli is just over 20. However, if we look at the rest of the slides, we see that blue really goes down. In other words, the blue, our French fries really don't contain a lot of calcium, vitamin C, vitamin A, and folate. Doesn't have much of that. However, broccoli does. So our broccoli is giving us a lot of nutrients with our calcium, vitamin C, vitamin A, folate. So our broccoli is a nutrient-rich or dense food, because if you eat the broccoli, you get low calories, but a lot of nutrients. That's what we want. Let's think of a donut. A donut pretty much has no nutritional value. Tastes good. Krispy Kreme is awesome, right? However, there's really no nutrients in there. So with a donut, you're going to consume calories, right? You're going to get a lot of calories, a lot of sugar, things that are not good for you, and you're going to get zero nutritional value, right? Compare that to, gosh, a nectarine. You know, my kids and I just went to Costco recently, and nectarines are ripe and they're in season. And we brought home this box of nectarines, and all of us are just like dying, because it is truly, eating a fresh nectarine is like eating sugar. It tastes so juicy and sweet. It makes my mouth water just thinking about the nectarine, right? So I want my kids to have nectarines for dessert instead of having chocolate chip cookies. Because even though the nectarine has sugar, there is sugar in our fruit, right? There is sugar. It's naturally produced sugar. It's not added sugar. And along with the sugar that's in the nectarine comes all of the different vitamins and minerals and nutrients that are wonderful compared to your chocolate chip cookies, which really don't have nutrients in them, right? And so that's what we mean when we talk about nutrient density, comparing foods, how many calories are in it, and how much nutrient do I get out of it, all right? So to ensure that we get a healthier, proper diet, you want to do these three things, right? You want to eat foods that have been minimally processed. And this is really hard because here in America, most of our food is processed. So if you go to the grocery store, you go down the aisle and you pick out a package of Oreos, then you pick out a bag of Doritos, right? And then you pick out, you know, Stouffer's frozen lasagna. You do all these things. You get some yogurt, Yoplait yogurt. All of these things have been processed, right? They've all been processed, and therefore they don't have as much nutrients in them. They have more chemicals and processed things in them, right? So keep that down to a minimal. Eat foods that have high nutrient content compared to calories. We just talked about that. So choosing the fruit, right? Low cal and lots of nutrients in our fruit and vegetables, okay? And then also limit our added sugars and fats. This is a hard one because, again, we live in a society where we have a cupcake stand on every corner, right? We have, all of our grocery stores have bakeries. We like our sweets, and I am a baker myself, so I love sweet things. However, we have to limit them. Doesn't mean we can't have them, just means we have to limit them. Right? So if we do these three things, you want to keep these in mind for the exam, we should hopefully kind of be on that road to having a healthy, proper diet. All right, later on we'll talk more about obesity. This is a really big concern. It's becoming an epidemic here in the US culture and society. When you talk about 35% of our adults being in the obese category and almost 20% of our kids, of our children, already being obese, it's really unhealthy because of the different health chronic conditions that come along with obesity. Okay. All right, so again, talking about our diet here, processed and convenience foods tend to provide what? A lot of calories, high calories, few nutrients. They tend to be higher in fat, sugar, and salt. We just talked about that. So all of your, Oreos are awesome. However, Oreos aren't healthy for you, right? So that's an example of a food that has few nutrients, high calories. It's going to be high in fat, sugar, and salt, right? All our canned foods are definitely all going to have lots of sodium in them. So we need to be really careful because right now, this is where we are. We eat a lot of our food away from home. Here we are comparing a couple options of what to have for breakfast. So breakfast at home, breakfast out. You're going to see a huge difference in price, number one, for those of us who are concerned about the budget. And number two, you're going to see a difference in calories, right? So look at these, take some time to explore. Here we see kind of the foods we should be eating, our whole grains and vegetables and fruits and everything. The foods we should limit, which is going to be our fat and our sodium, our high calorie foods. And then we look at how the choices we make can lead to detrimental health consequences. So making poor food choices. If you continue to eat your chips and your cookies and your soda and your diet consists of that on a daily basis, you're looking at these diseases in the purple, which are really heart disease, number one. Right? Heart disease is the number one killer in America. Heart disease is preventable in most cases. Some of it is genetic, but in general, it's related to the foods we eat and lack of or exercise we do. So heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, these four are all related to the food choices you and I make. So you're going to learn in this class that you have a lot of control over your health. Okay? And again, if we talk about your health, we're talking about two things. All of us have genetic traits. We are all predisposed genetically to some certain conditions. However, a large part of it also has to do with your diet. And when we say lifestyle, we mean, do you smoke? Do you drink? Do you do drugs? Do you exercise or do you not? These are lifestyle choices that can either affect our health in a positive or negative way. All right, factors here you'll look at later that really influence, again, our obesity and making sure we make some good choices, having a balanced diet. And again, I'm really big on having everything in moderation. So I don't like to tell people that you cannot ever have cheesecake or can't ever have your Oreos. You just need to really make sure that you're balancing that with healthy choices and that you're having them, once a week. Here we see a slide of some common portion sizes, and this is where we really go wrong in America because, again, when you go out to eat, we have huge portions, right? We see here for meat, we should be eating 3 to 5 ounces of meat in a serving, and yet when you go out to eat, they're going to ask you, do you want the 8-ounce or the 12-ounce steak? Well, that's too much. And so you need to keep these portion sizes in mind when you spread on your peanut butter or spread on your jams or your butter. How much should you be spreading on there? But keep this slide in mind when you start to do your diet study analysis project because you're going to need to be gauging how much did you eat, and this slide will help you with that. Again, looking at some comparisons here, going from the not so healthy choice of eating French fries to the healthier choice of having a baked potato. Yummy, I loved baked potato, right? And then also understanding that, let's say you do splurge and you go to McDonald's or you go and you have a meal that is high in calories and maybe fat. You have to remember that you can compensate for that somewhat. So that means that day you need to get out there and you need to run a couple extra miles, or you need to walk on your treadmill, or you need to go and play a sport or do something that's going to burn off the extra calories that you ate, right? And again, here we just kind of mentioned the scientific method, which is how we know so much that we know about food, because we've done research on it and we've experimented to determine what foods are healthy and what foods cause disease. Here we have a couple slides I usually throw in at the end of our chapters, which is basically just kind of having you think about something. So what is true about our food choices? No, most of us Americans don't choose foods for their nutritional value. Our food choices are often limited to those produced locally. No, most of us actually eat frozen food or foods that are in large supply at Walmart or Safeway or wherever you shop. Foods available in the store means that they will be available to all people. No, not really, because not all of us can afford all foods, right? The foods we are exposed to as children influence what we eat as adults. Very true. Right? Very, very true. Think again of your background and your upbringing, right? I came from a Latino home, Mexican-American home, and I was raised on beans and rice. That was just our staple, right? I was not exposed to things like mac and cheese until much later in life. I was not exposed to even fish until I was a lot older, right? Because as I grew up, my mother, my grandmother cooked certain foods that were part of our culture, and those foods really are what I continue to eat today, or that they've influenced my choices as an adult. All right, which of the following classes of nutrients provide our energy? Remember, so we're looking for those macronutrients, because the macronutrients, the ones we need in large quantities, are the ones that really give us our nutrients. And which one is that? Really, right? It's going to be our carbohydrates, our proteins, and our lipids. Those are the big three. It's going to be C. And then which are the different, health-related, nutrition-related diseases or causes of death in the US that we recently talked about? So we said it was going to be heart disease, cancer, stroke, maybe diabetes. So these are the things that nutrition really affects these diseases. And there's a direct correlation between the foods you eat and the development of these diseases. And then I'll leave some tips with you here. So just read through here and understand how important some of these choices are. Like spinach is one of the things that I make sure to always throw in to our salad. So when I'm feeding the kids salads, I always throw in lots of spinach with the other romaine lettuce or other greens because it is so rich in vitamins and minerals, and it tastes good, actually. I have one kid who loves ranch, and as long as I will let them put ranch dressing on their salad, they will eat it, right? So I do what I have to do to get them to eat what I want them to eat. All right, let's see. Talking about breakfast. I hear all the time that students tell me they skip breakfast. They say, I'm just not hungry that early in the morning, or, I'm rushing out the door. I don't have time. However, look here, statistically speaking, your body needs to eat first thing in the morning, right? I always eat first thing in the morning because even though I may not feel hungry, my body has been what I call fasting, right? You haven't eaten since you last had a meal or last had a snack the night before. And then your body is going without food all night long. It's what we call fasting, right? So when your body wakes up, you need to have breakfast to break the fast that your body is going through. And research clearly shows here that if you actually eat breakfast, you're going to be able to actually lose weight or keep your weight at a healthy balance than if you skip your breakfast. And we'll talk more about that later, right? Some good choices for having breakfast, right? Hard-boiled eggs are a really good source of protein along with some other things, right? I love to eat whole grain toast with the banana in the morning or even for my evening snack. So we'll talk about how some of these are some good options for you. Okay. All right, so this is kind of running through. I know it's fast, but I want to, again, make sure that I don't take up a lot of your time since we have a lot of chapters to go through. And I just wanted to point out or maybe give some examples or clarification for some of the information that we're learning in Chapter 1. Okay, we'll see you for Chapter 2.